Something strange happens the moment you put your face online. You're not just seen, you're read, interpreted, reduced all within seconds. Not everyone is afraid to post a photo, but many people are exhausted by watching their face turn into something others get to judge and assign value to. You can feel that moment clearly, your finger hovering over the post button. Not fear, just a quiet question. Once this is out there, what will I have to carry with me? If you've ever felt relief in not pressing that button, this story isn't really about social media. It's about the invisible cost of letting your face become a public storefront. It's late. The house is so quiet, you can hear the refrigerator humming softly in the kitchen. No new messages, no one asking you to show up, respond, or prove anything. After you didn't post that photo, everything slipped back into a familiar rhythm. Low yellow light. Your phone face down on the table. No vibration, no glow. The room doesn't feel empty. It just feels less pulled outward. Outside, the street keeps doing what it always does. Headlights, noise, people passing by. A world accustomed to watching and being watched. But inside, you've just closed a wooden gate. Not locked, not tense. Just closed enough to keep the dust from blowing in. When your face isn't out there anymore, you don't have to carry it with you through the evening. You don't have to guess what anyone might be thinking. You don't have to adjust your expression in your imagination. You sit down, you exhale. That lightness doesn't feel like a victory, and it doesn't feel like escape. It's more like taking off a jacket you didn't realize you'd been wearing for too long. Nothing collapses because you stayed quiet. No one disappears from your life because you didn't open the gate. If anything, you're still here, clearly, just no longer placed under a constant gaze. For many people, this moment arrives late in life, after enough explanations, after enough exhaustion from being misunderstood. Not because they hate the world, but because they begin to realize some parts of life grow better without an audience. Inside that wall, the garden isn't silent. It's just not loud. And if you're sitting here now, listening to this, not looking for advice, only wanting to feel less alone in that choice, then maybe this is where the story truly begins. From the street, a tall, closed wall rarely feels comforting. People can't see what's inside. They can't hear the rhythm of life. They don't know whether sunlight ever touches the leaves. And when people can't see, they guess. They guess the way the street always guesses. Fast, simple, convenient. So, when you don't share your face, when you don't open the front of your private life to the street, familiar labels begin to appear. Shy, insecure, withdrawn, avoidant. Sometimes, no one says them out loud, but you feel them in smaller things. A question that sounds casual, a glance tilted just slightly, an unnecessary pause in conversation. They're tiring in a very particular way. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the feeling that you're carrying around an explanation you never wanted to give. What matters is this: those assumptions don't always come from malice. In fact, they're easy to understand. Standing on the street, looking at a sealed wall, it's easy to mistake it for a prison. Not because people are cruel, but because from that position, they don't have another way to imagine it. Silence, from a distance, often looks like emptiness. Privacy, from a distance, often looks like a problem. A carefully sheltered garden, seen from far away, is easily read as a place where nothing is growing. And you've heard those labels before. Maybe for a long time. They create a very specific kind of exhaustion, the exhaustion of being misunderstood and not wanting to correct it. The exhaustion of knowing that each time you don't open the gate, people assume you're lacking something when in truth, you're protecting something. The street is used to seeing. It believes in what's laid out in plain sight. Some people live comfortably in that space. They're used to keeping doors open, used to letting their lives remain visible, continuous, under the eyes of others. They post more. They speak more. They show up more often. That doesn't make them better, and it doesn't make you worse. It simply reveals something very basic. Everyone has a different tolerance for the public gaze. For some, that gaze feels like sunlight. For others, it feels like dust. And when you begin to feel worn down, closing the gate isn't escape, it's an adjustment. The problem only arises when that adjustment is read as a flaw of character. Not everyone needs a garden thrown open to the street, and not every wall is built out of fear. But from the sidewalk, it's hard to tell the difference. So if you've ever felt tired of carrying those labels, know that the feeling is real. You don't need to argue with them. You don't need to prove them wrong. You don't need to turn your life into a report. Sometimes it's enough to recognize this. Their assumptions are understandable. They're standing on the street. They're looking at the wall and guessing there's nothing inside. They don't know there's a garden. You've heard these labels before. And there's one thing you can keep quietly to yourself, like a warm stone in your pocket. That wall was never built for them. There's an important distinction that rarely gets named, especially by those who've lived through enough noise to lose any desire to keep explaining themselves. Sharing an idea is not the same as sharing a face. You can post a quote, a photo of the sky, a book you're halfway through, a coffee cup on a desk, a work note, a short reflection on something you've just learned. Those things are like plants in a garden. People can see them, pause for a moment, walk past, and keep going. They aren't you in the way people use to judge you. A face is different. A face isn't just an image. It's the first thing others use to place you into a category in their mind. It's a shortcut for classification. A fast label sometimes faster than any sentence you've written. So when you share your face, you're not just opening the garden gate. You're changing the structure of the garden itself. You hang a sign on the wall, a storefront. Sometimes, you even replace the quiet wooden gate with a sheet of glass. Glass does something strange. It lets people see you, but it doesn't let you touch them. It creates closeness, but an unsafe kind of closeness. You stand behind that glass, knowing any gaze can press against the surface, scan it, inspect it. And somewhere inside, there's always a faint tension. If the glass cracks, you won't be able to control what happens next. When a face becomes the storefront, the private garden is no longer just a place to live. It starts to resemble a public shop. People stop. They look. They evaluate. Not because they're cruel, but because that's how storefronts work. When there's a shop, people look to see what's being offered. And here, the product isn't just commented on. It's priced. You feel this in something very simple. Likes, hearts, views, reactions. Those small numbers function like a floating price tag, even if no one admits it. And if you've ever looked at a photo of yourself and counted the responses, you know the feeling. No one has to say anything out loud. You still sense that you've been placed on a shelf. Your face gets read quickly. Do you look friendly? Trustworthy? Put together by social standards? Attractive enough to deserve attention? Worth a few extra seconds of someone's time? These questions are rarely spoken. They happen almost instantly, in silence. And what makes it exhausting isn't what others think, it's that you know they'll think it. You know your face is an invitation to that process. To be seen, to be interpreted, to be reduced. Not into a full human being, but into an impression that's easy to consume. And here, a subtle but crucial shift occurs, from inside to outside. When you share a thought, you're still in a position of agency. Your idea can be discussed, agreed with or not, and then set aside. People might dislike what you say, but it's harder to price you with a single number. When you share your face, though, the center of gravity shifts from inner experience to external reaction. You begin to feel the gaze before it even arrives. You anticipate how others will read you. And very quietly, you adjust. Not because you want to perform, but because you don't want to be misunderstood. That's when the motivation changes. From sharing because it means something to you, to sharing because of how it will be seen. From inward to outward. And the deepest fatigue comes from this. You're still living your life, but you've begun living a second one as well. The life of your face in other people's eyes. A life you don't control, but still have to bear the impact of. At some point, you realize you don't want the garden to become a place where anyone can stand outside and browse. You don't want the sign, you don't want the glass, you want the wooden gate back, you want the right not to be priced. For some people, this doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like a form of awareness that arrived late. Sharing your face turns a private garden into a public storefront. And if you're tired because of that, know this. You're not imagining the cost. It's real, and it makes sense. When a garden begins to be cared for more attentively, a wall often appears. Not all at once, not out of hostility, but because an ecosystem needs protection. A garden that opens fully onto the street receives many things at once. Sunlight, yes, but also dust, noise, footprints, and hands that never asked for permission. People may step in just to look and accidentally trample what you've just planted. They may snap a branch because it looks nice. They may leave behind a comment that costs you an entire afternoon. You don't have to hate anyone to find that exhausting. The wall isn't born to oppose the world. It's born to filter, to keep what nourishes and block what disrupts. The same is true of inner life. When you begin to feel worn down by the public gaze, closing the gate isn't escape. It's a natural adjustment. Like pulling the curtains when the sunlight is too harsh, like closing a door when the wind carries too much dust. You're not resisting light. You're regulating how much of it comes in. In this sense, the wall functions as an ecological filter. It doesn't stop you from living. It helps you live at the right pace. Because not everything, for everyone, needs to be broadcast. Not every moment needs an audience. Not every part of you needs a front-facing display to be recognized as real. Across the sources you've shared, one observation repeats itself. Many people gradually move away from publicly broadcasting everything and shift toward narrower, more selective forms of sharing with fewer people. Some prefer temporary spaces, some prefer small groups, some share only with a handful who truly understand. Not because they lack something, but because they know their limits. In other words, they move from the street into the garden, and the wall is what allows the garden to function. Withdrawal, in this case, isn't regression. It's an adaptive strategy. There are extroverted people who remain highly visible in public spaces. Their presence keeps the street loud and constantly reinforces the sense that it's where one should be. But if you've lived long enough to know what you need, you understand this. You don't have to stand on the street just because the street is crowded. You're allowed to remain still in the garden. The wall gives you three very concrete, very ordinary things. First, it reduces how often you're pulled outward. You don't have to respond constantly, don't have to keep watching others watch you. You don't have to carry your face through the marketplace every day just to prove that you still exist. Second, it protects what's still tender. Some thoughts need time to ripen. Some emotions need quiet to settle. Some plans only need to be done, not announced. Without an audience, you censor yourself less. You work more deeply. You live more honestly, in a very quiet way. Third, it returns ownership of your rhythm. The outside may remain noisy, but inside you can hear yourself. You may still step onto the street from time to time. You still have colleagues, family, a few meetings, a few necessary calls. The wall doesn't demand that you become a hermit. It simply allows you to choose which door to open and for how long. And that choice, for someone who's lived enough, is not a small one. It's a deeply practical way of living, drawn from experience, knowing what scatters you and no longer forcing yourself to endure it just to fit, knowing what nourishes you and protecting it without apology. Because the street carries an unspoken suggestion. If you don't put yourself on display, you don't exist. But the garden operates on a different logic. You exist before anyone sees you. Your value doesn't increase with more witnesses, and it doesn't diminish when you're quiet. You don't need to turn the wall into a statement. You only need to use it as a tool. And this is the crucial point. The wall is not a declaration of war. It doesn't say, I am above. It says, I am enough. It is care, not rejection. The wall didn't go up to keep people out. It went up to let something grow. Inside the stone boundary, the soil loosens. Roots grow deeper. Plants sway less under unfamiliar winds. Fragile things are given time to grow without being touched too soon. And when you see it this way, a very clear relief appears. For some people, the clearest feeling is this: they no longer feel they owe the world their face. You don't owe the street an entrance. You don't owe anyone an explanation for wanting to live quietly. You're still present. You still think. You still feel. You just don't place your life on a shelf to wait for a price tag. And sometimes peace begins with a very simple sentence, one you don't need to say out loud to anyone. Nothing needs to be explained. You let it rest there, like a gate closed at the right moment, so the garden can continue to live. Something very different begins to happen once the wall has been there long enough. It's not the first thing you see, it's the first thing you hear. Inside the garden, the soundscape changes. In the morning, before you reach for your phone, you hear the sound of pages turning. Not hurried, not decisive, just paper touching paper steady, unforced. In the kitchen, water begins to boil. Not an alarm. Just the familiar sound of heat rising, enough to tell you things are unfolding exactly as they should. Outside the window, wind moves through leaves. It carries no message. It asks nothing of you. These sounds aren't special. They don't need to be recorded. They only need to exist. And because there's no audience, you hear them more clearly. On the other side of the wall, the street continues its work. Horns, voices, alerts, notifications lighting up, then disappearing. A constant chain of signals reminding you that something needs attention. Not all of it is bad, but all of it demands energy. The sound of the street isn't just noise. It's a frequency, a fast, urgent rhythm that keeps pulling your attention outward. A rhythm that holds your body in a state of readiness even when there's no real danger. And here's what the wall does. Something few people talk about. It doesn't just block the gaze, it filters the frequency. As the gaze recedes, your body loosens. You're no longer constantly asking, is someone looking at me? What are they thinking? Do I need to respond? No storefront, no price tag, no glass pane, just enough quiet for your nervous system to drop a notch. This isn't an idea, it's a very concrete experience. When you're not being called on all the time, you startle less. When notifications don't interrupt, your thoughts run longer, uninterrupted. When no gaze is waiting, you adjust yourself less. You begin to notice something surprising. For many people, quiet doesn't feel like disappearing. It feels like gathering. You're more fully present in very small things. Reading a few pages without stopping to check something, drinking a hot cup of tea without thinking about taking a photo, sitting still for a few minutes without feeling the need to fill the space. Not because you've outgrown the desire to be seen, but because in that moment you're no longer lacking it. A quiet exchange is taking place. Less attention from the outside, more steadiness on the inside. Not everyone wants that exchange, and that's okay. But if you've ever tried it, you know the difference isn't intellectual. It lives in the body. Many people describe feeling lighter, their breathing no longer rushed, time no longer chopped into fragments. That's why so many say they feel enough when they stop putting their face on display. Not because their lives are smaller, but because they no longer have to carry them through the marketplace. The wall doesn't make the garden silent. It allows the garden to hear itself. The wall doesn't just block the gaze, it filters the noise. And as the noise fades, you begin to hear something very clear, very familiar. This is enough. Not in the sense of stopping, but in the sense of not needing more. At some point, you stop thinking about the wall. It's no longer a decision, no longer a position, no longer something that needs explaining. It's simply there, the way a gate closes every evening. Not out of fear, not out of dislike, just because the day is enough. The light slows. Dusk settles against the stone wall. Colors soften without needing to be remembered. Inside the garden, there is no final message, no lesson to extract, no advice to carry forward. Only a very quiet feeling. You are in the right place. No one is looking in. No one is waiting for you to appear. No one needs you to prove that you're still alive. And strangely, it's in this unwitnessed state that you feel yourself more clearly present. Not because you've become more important, but because you're no longer splitting your attention. Life without an audience doesn't become less valuable. It simply becomes less noisy. You still think. You still feel. You still do very ordinary things. But you no longer ask, is this worth being seen? You ask instead, is this nourishing me? And that question doesn't require a grand answer. It's answered by sensation. The feeling of calm. The feeling of enough. The feeling of not being pulled anywhere. You haven't disappeared from the world. You've simply stopped standing in the middle of the street. Many people don't feel like they're rejecting connection, only choosing a quieter form of it. The wall remains. The gate stays closed. not tense, not locked, just in its proper place. And if someone passes by, they're free to guess whatever they want. Inside, you don't need to adjust anything. A life doesn't need witnesses to be alive. Not everything that is vivid needs to be seen. Not everything meaningful needs a stamp of approval. Some lives are lived best without being named. You sit quietly in that garden, waiting for nothing more, needing no ending, just letting the day settle.